This week on the Timelapse Show, we're going to walk through the entire process so that you can see everything beginning to end as far as how I go about creating a time lapse and what all is involved. Welcome everyone to episode number 3 of the Timelapse Show. My name is Steve Barth. I am your host, and this is, like I said, episode number 3 for the week beginning July 1st, 2018. So there's really no breaking news this week as far as time-lapse or new gear or any of that kind of stuff. So let's break right into the main part of the show here as we walk you through exactly what's going to happen in my process step by step. Now, before we get started, there's a couple things I really want to emphasize here. First of all, what we're going to be talking about today is my process. Now, there's not a right process and there's not a wrong process. There is simply individual processes. So while this process works for me, this may be completely different from how you do it. And you may have your own way of doing it, your own software, your own workflow. That's perfectly fine. I'm not saying that what I do is the right way. I'm simply saying this is how I do it. It works for me. Therefore, I'm going to share it with you, my audience. The second thing that I want to talk about is the fact that I'm really going to be kind of giving you a general overview of everything here in this episode as far as the entire process. So, for instance, at the very beginning of this, I'm going to say it's important to go and prepare your shots and figure out where you're going to go, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to move on. And you might think, well, wait a minute, how do you do that? Don't worry. What you can mentally add to almost every single thing that you're going to see in this episode is I'll be covering this in each of these little sections in a whole bunch more detail in future episodes. So stay tuned. Don't worry. For instance, next week's episode is going to be all about preparing. There's so many cool tools that you can use to help you awesomely prepare for doing time-lapse work. But that's next week. Today, we're just going to say, figure out where you're going to go. So, again, add in future episodes, more details coming in future episodes to everything that I say today. So, that said, let's get started. First things first, we need to pack our gear. There's quite a few things we're going to need to go out and do a time lapse. Figure out what it is that you want to take with you. Put it in your bag. Get it all secure. And let's head out and find the perfect spot to shoot a time lapse, get it set up, and taken. So here I am getting ready to film a nice evening sunset shot. But before I do, there's a couple things we're going to have to really keep in mind. First off is that of the gear. We got to make sure that we've got everything with us. The big things to remember, tripod. You got to have a nice sturdy tripod, and you've got to have the camera. Now, there's a lot of different cameras that you can choose from. We're going to talk about those in, again, future episodes as far as which ones are going to be best for what you're doing. Big things you got to try to remember are things like this, the head of the tripod. Make sure you always keep it on the top, because if it comes off and you get out to shoot, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. The other thing to keep in mind is this little guy. This is what connects the camera to the head of the tripod, and without this, you're also in trouble. So again, pick the camera that you're going to want to pick. Make sure you've got your tripod and all of your accessories, and then get it set up. Now we have the camera all set up. We've got the shot that we want. Everything is all dialed in. We hit the button. And now we wait. So now we're back here in the studio, back in front of the computer, and this is where we're going to process the time lapse that we just went out and shot. So first things first, we've got to import the footage. So I'm going to put my card, I'm going to take it out of my camera, I'm going to put it into the computer. However that works. Sometimes it's a cable, sometimes you put the SD card into the computer. However it works for your particular system, we need to access the footage that's on that card. So here comes the footage. Let's see, whichever folder. So now I've got all of my footage here. I can see the individual JPEG files that it created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those. I'm going to select all of those files, and I'm going to move them over to a drive here on my computer. It's going to take a few minutes, so I'm not going to show this whole process because you don't want to have to sit through that. But once it's done, I now have a folder on my hard drive that's got all of the footage, or all the pictures, individual pictures that I just shot. That I can come through and look at. I can pull up the pictures. I can see them. All right, that looks pretty good. Now it's time to actually process this shot. Now, this is going to be something that's definitely going to be different for everybody. I personally, for this type of thing, I use QuickTime Player 7, which is a really old piece of software, but you know what? It works, and it still works, so I still use it. If you want to use QuickTime 7, just Google that. There's videos as far as how to get it downloaded. It's kind of a legacy program, so it's not something that they offer anymore. In order to do what I'm doing, you need QuickTime 7 Pro, which you used to have to pay for. Now, again, if you look online, you can figure out ways of getting that. You can do this, what I'm about to do, also in the GoPro software. There are a number of other software programs out there. Again, future episodes, but figure out which software you want to use. So for me, from QuickTime Player 7, I'm going to say open an image sequence. Now I need to point it towards my hard drive. All those are on the desktop. Here's the folder, and I'm going to make sure that it is sorted by the date. I want to make sure that I'm pointing it towards the very first file. So this one is at 7:09 p.m. If I sort this way, this is 5:17 p.m. That's earlier, so this one right here, 1171, is going to be my first shot. So I'm going to open that, just the first shot. I don't have to open all of them, just the first shot. It's going to recognize, because I'm opening an image sequence, that there's a lot of other images that are part of this. Now, I do want this as a 24 frames per second project, so I'm okay. And it's going to process. Now, this is a huge file. So when I look at this, I'm only getting just a little corner of the shot. So I'm going to switch my view to half the size, and even half the size is really big. But this now allows me I can step by step come through and sort through this with by hitting my arrow keys, so I can kind of get a sense of what's going on. But what I need to do is I need to export this so that I can work on this in a video editor. I'm going to come up to File. I'm going to say Export. Now here again, this is what I do. Everyone's going to do this differently, but these are the settings that I've used. So first of all, I'm going to make it a QuickTime movie. My options. This is what I want to do. In my options, I want to say, let's go to Settings. This is where I'm going to pick my codec. What I commonly do is Apple ProRes 422. It's a good high quality. It's going to make this file gigantic. You don't want to, at this point in time, do H.264. It's going to limit the file down just too much. What I'm doing here in this first render is I'm making kind of this master file that I'm going to reference from all the anytime I'm making changes to it in the future. This is kind of like my big master file. So it needs to be big, it needs to be beefy, it needs to have all the data in it that I can possibly get. So that's why I'm going with ProRes 422. Frame rate, I already set it to be 24, so I'm just going to leave that as the current, and we should be good to go there. Now, size is another big one for here. This is something that I've started doing, and it's worked really well for me. I'm going to render this file out as an 8K file. There's a lot of brouhaha right now about, HD versus 4K versus, other formats. I want this thing big. As you saw when this thing came in, this file is big. It's a big picture. I want to take advantage of that. So I am rendering it as an 8K file. The traditional size of an 8K file is 7680 by 4320. So it's going to be big. Now, because GoPro cameras that I used to shoot this with shoot kind of, funky size images, I don't want it stretching and adjusting this. So I'm going to say preserve aspect ratio by letterboxing the image. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. But it's kind of important to keep all of your dimensions correct. Okay, there's no sound to this, so I don't have to worry about anything sound-wise. So now we should be good to go. We're going to give it a name. I'm going to call this Chapel 1. And we're going to let it go. Now, again, this is going to take some time, so I'm not going to show that the whole process. But just like everyone's favorite cooking shows, oh, look, it's done. So now, remember when there was that option that I showed you just a second ago to letterbox it? This is what it looks like now with the letterboxing. So it's added black bars, this time to the side, so that your middle picture here is all still within the proper the proper format, the proper dimensions that you shot it in. Everything's good to go there. So now that I've got this file and if we scroll through it, it's all going to look good. This is now what I'm going to want to pull into my video editor. Now, I can use just about any video editor. I know Adobe Premiere, I know Final Cut Pro. For this demo here, for processing time lapses like this, I typically use Final Cut Pro, but the editor doesn't matter. You can do all this kind of stuff in every editor. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to create a new event. Event is just a container where you can hold files. And I create a new project. I'm going to have my event. It's one of the things I want is I'm going to designate my size here. I want this to be a 4K image. This event's name is going to be, I'm just going to call this demo. Or demo 1, because I already have a demo. This is the proper frame rate. So these are all the settings that, again, I use. I'm going to say OK. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this clip over into this event. So now I have this clip. So now I'm going to take this clip that I just created and I'm going to drag it down into my timeline. Now I can kind of scroll through and see. Let's verify real fast by hitting the information button over here that it is, in fact, a really big 8K file. And this is a 4K project, so everything should line up as I had hoped. Now, a lot of different things that I can do here. One of the things I'm going to look at first is, do I want to add any movement to this shot? I didn't have all the stuff with me to do movement on site, so I'm going to have to add that here in post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to this little box down here. It's called the crop menu. In the crop menu, you're going to see several choices. One of those is crop, which is what I want. And when I select that, you're going to see a little dot box around this. And what I want is Ken Burns. Now, what the Final Cut Pro does is it gives me two boxes, a green box labeled Start down here at the bottom, and a red box labeled End. This shows me where what's going to be in the shot when the shot starts, and what's going to be in when it finishes. So I'm going to shrink this down quite a bit because I want it to start maybe somewhere down here. I'm not worried about the building over here in the shot. So I want to kind of focus on this. And the nice thing is, because I have this as an 8K file, if I have to go down to 200%, I'm not losing any resolution. I can blow it up, I can shrink it down, I can do all sorts of different things because of that 8K file structure. So this is where I want it to start, and it'll show you visually what the frame looks like when you start. When I click over here on end, it's going to show me what that end shot looks like. And now I can take the corners here and I can shrink this down and move this around. So I'm saying when it ends, this is what it's going to be. Now, as I'm someone who likes big sky in my time lapses, you can see here at the start, I only want, a little bit of the ground in the shot. I want it focused on the sky. And then when I end, I don't want any of the black bars in there. I just want this nice big sky. So that's done. So now you can see there's this kind of movement built into the shot. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to more dramatically color it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to my color menu and I'm going to say show the color inspector. The colors are probably pretty good. I just want to focus on the exposure. So up here, I could say color, saturation, that's okay. Exposure, yes, let's mess with that. And there's a couple things I can mess with. First of all, the master, which is this big slider, this is going to just adjust everything off to the side. I don't need to do that. What I want to do is, for instance, this black dot is your shadows. Your gray dot is your midtones, and your white dot is your highlights. We're just playing at this point in time. We're going to kind of mess around. All right, well, let's drop this because I don't want a lot of emphasis on the building. I don't want that to be a distraction. Let's drop this because I really want to highlight the whites of these clouds. And I can kind of heighten this a little bit. Just again, I really want the beauty of this sky to come through. And that's all going to be messed with there. Once I have everything the way that I want it, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to share this out. I'm going to say share master file. From here, I can enter my settings. I don't need audio, video. If I'm going to post this on the web, I can get away with H.264. Again, I'm going to save my original 8K files so that I always have those. If I ever need to change the movement in there, I can go back and change those. But for this web distribution, I just, H.264 is probably fine. It is in 4K quality, so it's going to look amazing. And from there, I can render it out to my desktop. So now, like any good cooking show, well, let's look at the final version. So that is the process. I hope I didn't lose you in some of the details there at the end. Again, as I said at the top of this episode, I'll be going through all of this in lots of detail in future episodes as far as what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. This is just meant to be a kind of a basic overview to show you the different steps that the time-lapse goes through from the very beginning when I've thought of it in my brain to the end when I have a final product that I can release online. Hopefully that has been educational for you and insightful, and you can look and say, how does my workflow compare? And maybe there's some things that we can all do differently, but that's part of the fun of this. So before we run out of time, let's do this week's time-lapse clip of the week. One of the things that's been in the news a lot lately as far as natural phenomenon has been the volcanoes erupting in Hawaii. Some people have posted some really cool lava pictures as far as the lava flow. I happened to find one this week that was posted by Discover Oregon. I'll put the link to it in the show notes, and you can kind of see a little bit of it right here. Obviously, for copyright purposes, I'm not going to show the whole thing, but go check it out. There's some amazing stuff in there. And again, this is what time-lapse is all about. This is why we do this amazing art, so that we can take these beautiful things we find in nature, speed them up, and understand better what's going on, and just really enjoy the beauty of it. So that's it for this week's episode of the Timelapse Show. Remember, you can follow us on social media and ask questions there as well. So on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, just search for the Timelapse Show and look for our logo and follow us on all of those different mediums. If you want to send the show an email, you can do so at show@thetimelapseshow.com. The address is right down here. You can also send us a voicemail so that we can answer your questions on the show. Just call 541-321-0472. Again, I'll put the number right here on the screen so that you can call in and let us know what you think and let us know what your questions are. So again, we can answer those in future episodes. Now grab a camera and go move the world.